Again, I thank everyone for taking their time to show up today and taking their to take a look at the zipForm Plus webinar that we're going to be showing you. Our goal here today is to really take a time and show you zipForm Plus, the new transaction management, the digital link application to really take your transaction to the next level and help organize and keep you on track during your transactions while using zipForm Plus. So as we go through this, you will be in listen-only mode due to the size of the group of people that we have in the webinar today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type those questions in the questions pane. So we are definitely going to get to those questions as they come up and do our best to answer all those questions as they're being typed in. So please be patient as we do take time to answer the questions. But we, again, do appreciate everyone's time on joining us today. So with zipForm Plus, the new transaction management is a very integrated application within the system. So when we go through this today, you're going to see how integrated it is and how easy it is to use. So when we're logging into zipForm Plus, as you may know, you log into the Texas Association of Realtor website. So you come in, you plug in the username and a password, and you would simply click sign and log in. Upon logging in through the TAR website, you will eventually end up at your transaction list. This is where all of your transactions are going to reside. Anything you're currently working on or worked on in the past, you will be able to find and locate on this screen. What we're looking at the screen right now is a tile view, and this is a personal preference. So you can switch between this very easily. If you see it in a tile view, that's okay. If you click up here and click on the list view, it'll switch it between your personal preference. So you can either look at it in the tile view or list view. It's really up to you. To go back and forth, all you need to do is click on that icon. So again, very easily to switch between tile and list. When you're in the list view, you do get a little bit more information regarding when it was modified, when it was created, and when the transaction expires. Okay, this is when the transaction expires within the application itself. And we are going to meet the DRE regulation for the state. So however long you're required to hold that transaction, it will go ahead and store that transaction for you for the allocated DRE regulation for your state. Okay, so tile, list view, really up to you. You can also sort your transactions out by the date modified and the transaction name. So you either switch either one of these, it'll go ahead and organize them based upon your preference. You can take that one step further and look for transactions based upon their status. So either if you're looking for active or inactive transactions, or your property type, or the listing of the transaction type, so listing, purchase, or a lease, and then your property types over here. So you can organize your transaction based upon their statuses, and then ultimately you also have the ability to search for a transaction as well. So if I'm going to look for a particular transaction, say it's 895 is the transaction that I'm looking for, the data will be brought up to you as you type. So it's an instant search functionality. So if I'm looking for a particular transaction, if I hover over the transaction, there is a menu drop-down. So if I go ahead and click on that drop-down, you're going to notice that I get transaction details, giving me information about the transaction, again, modified, when it was created, when it expires. Then over here on the right-hand side, you have some menu options. Being able to open the transaction this way if you'd like to, but one of them is being able to view, edit the details. So if I go ahead and click on that icon, it'll give me my transaction details. So this is where I could go in and click a listing and change it to a purchase if the transaction goes that way. I can also change the status. So this is where you can start to organize your transaction, changing it from active, inactive, or closed. So that way, when you come into zipForm, you're not looking at an entire list of active and inactive and closed transactions. It'll really start to help you organize your transactions, so that way when you come in, you only see your active and you can sort by your closed transactions. So very easy to organize them based upon the status. Going back to our menu drop down here, there's another feature in here called with the copy function. And the copy function comes in handy because if you're working on a transaction, say it's a purchase transaction and that buyer falls through and you need to create a new transaction. But say you want to keep the original in the application. So you can go ahead and make a copy of the transaction and go in and make changes and put some minor changes in with the new buyers, and that way you've kept the original, but now I've gone ahead and created a new transaction with a new set of buyers. So the copy transaction will be a fast and easy way to go ahead and make your minor changes to an existing transaction without having to start from scratch. You will have a toolbar that will be within your application. This toolbar is going to come with you as you navigate throughout the application itself. So the first icon we see here is our forms icon. So this is where you'd come in to go in and grab a form without actually naming the transaction. So you just want to get in, grab a form, fill it out. Here we have the new icon. This is where you create your new transaction. So we will be doing this as we will be doing that here in a few minutes as we cover a couple different items, but we will be creating a new transaction and show you that entire process. And then we have the import-export functionality. This comes in handy if you, after the 4 years that we're going to be storing your transactions, if you want to make a copy and store it elsewhere on your own computer, a pen drive, an external hard drive, you can click on the export function. And you can select your entire list of transactions. It'll take and make a copy to wherever you store it to. So it leaves the original in zipForm, and then it'll make a copy wherever you store it. If you go here and you ever need to bring those transactions back in, you have the option to import. And the great feature about the import is that if the transaction left, it'll come back in the same way as it left, making it a fully workable transaction again. Okay, so if you export it out and for some reason you ever need to bring that transaction back into zipForm, you can import it and it becomes a fully workable transaction again. But do keep in mind that we are going to store your transactions for the 4 years that is required by the state of Texas. We have clauses and lookup manager. We will talk about those when we get into a transaction, but this is where you can also manage your clauses. So the legal verbiage that you want to have on some of your addendums per se. So you can actually go ahead and plug in your own clauses that you want to use for future use. So that way you don't have to type out a clause every single time. So the clause manager allows you to create your own clauses, and maybe it's related to like an FHA clause or a VA pest clause. So you go ahead and plug in the clause and save it for future use. We are definitely going to show you how to utilize a clause within the application. But the clause manager is definitely where you can manage your clauses. The lookup manager we will show you when we get into a transaction. The last tool that we will talk about on this particular screen is our mortgage calculator. This is a great tool to give a general sense of what a particular property may cost your client. So if we have a property here, say it's $275,000, the interest rate maybe is 4%, and our loan term is 360 months or 30 years. After you decide to click on calculate, it'll give you a general sense on what the total monthly payment might be for this particular property. Then if you want to go ahead and throw in some property taxes, maybe they're $3,000 for the year. So you go ahead and plug that in and calculate it again. You're going to notice that the system will do the calculation for you. Again, giving you a better sense of what a particular property may cost your client. After you put in all the data, if you want to display this as a table, you can give them the whole amortization schedule, print this off and give it to them so they can physically see what they're going to pay out in principal and interest for the next 30 years. So a great tool just to give a general sense of what a particular property may cost. If we go back, you can also display it as a CSV file or VCard format. This would give you the ability to email it to your client as well. All right, so now before we actually create a new transaction, I want to take a moment here to talk about templates. Because in relation to the transaction management system that's going to help keep you on track, a template is a focal point of the system. So a template is a package of forms, your listing packets, your residential sale packets, items that you probably use today. One of the changes that we have here is when we're creating a new template, you give it a name. And after that, you decide on your template type. Is it a listing residential template? And then down here below, you're going to have the auto-apply functionality. So if you want to auto-apply this template anytime that you create a listing residential new transaction, the system's going to automatically apply that for you. So that way you don't have to think about it or do another step. You just select your type for the template, the property type, and the system will automatically apply a template for you. If you want to create yourself a very generic template, you can say that we're going to have this template automatically apply to every single transaction that you create within the application. So not just listing residential transactions, but every transaction that you create. If we make a change here to lease commercial, you'll notice that that right there will change. So the automatically applying this template will change to lease commercial transactions. So you could have multiple templates that automatically apply to different template types and property types. So again, the whole point behind a template is to save time, and when you set up your templates to do this, you're just removing steps. So that way, when you have created a template and it automatically applies, it's going to save you time. And we're definitely going to show how the auto apply will apply to one of my transactions that we are going to create. So let's go into my residential purchase template. You're going to see here that it's an auto-apply template, so it's letting me know that this template automatically applies to residential purchase transactions. Once I get into the template, you're going to notice that I have forms, and these are the forms that I would particularly use for a residential purchase transaction. And I always recommend putting in a cover sheet so we can see that we have the Texas Association of Realtors cover sheet. And if I open that up, I can fill out repetitious data on the cover sheet. So if I scroll down here, you're going to see that I have my brokerage information and then my contact information on there already. So this is data that I don't want to type out every single time that I create a residential purchase transaction. So I can put it on the template so that way when it's applied to the transaction, that data is going to be filled out for me. Maybe on the residential contract, there's repetitious data on here that I want to fill out. Maybe there's broker fees or processing fees that I have to plug in on the document every single time. Again, that would be repetitious data, so you can fill it out on the template. And that way you don't have to worry about filling it out, so it's going to be out in there automatically for you. You can also see here that we have a placeholder for a signed approval letter. So placeholders are holding a spot within the application that you want to remind yourself that you want to get in the future. So this can also come along with the template. So we have a signed approval letter, and we can say that we want to set a due date for it 1 day before the date of contract. And we can change that date because it's a relative date. So we could say 1 day, 2 days before or after any one of the dates. So I can say that it's going to be due before the offer date. Maybe I want it to be due before the listing date. So you can set relative due dates based upon when you want it to be due. And then finally within this template, you can include outside documents. And to bring outside documents into a template, all you have to do is click on Add Document, and it will give you some options. So you have the browse, and then you also have the ability to create a placeholder. Okay? So that's when you want to bring an outside document into a template, so when it's applied to a transaction, you'll see it come in there for you. And then with the template, this is where the transaction management comes into play, is the checklist. Okay? So you can create a checklist to help keep you on track, to remind you to do particular tasks. Okay? If they're broken out a couple of different ways, you have a checklist. So the checklist can be, final signed documents or closing. And then you have a category, final signed documents. So you can keep yourself on track and set up tasks to remind you want to have a signed sales agreement and it's due 2 days before the closing date. Okay? Or you want to do the appraisal report. You want to schedule the inspection. So you can set up tasks. The system will remind you to do these tasks based upon dates that you will plug in on the transaction. So this is where you'll set your checklist up to go along with your template. So that way when you're working a transaction, the data will come along with the forms, the repetitious data, and the checklist will come along with it. Okay, and you can set your checklist however you want based upon how you want to do business. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go transition back to our transaction page, and we're actually going to start a new transaction now. So we're going to go ahead and click on New. And we're going to give our transaction a name. We're going to name it 1327 Claiborne Lane. And it's going to be a purchase transaction, and it's going to be residential. And you'll notice right away that down here below, upon me selecting purchase residential, I'm having a template automatically apply. So I can say that I can see that it's an agent template. So the agent template is my template that I created, and it has a checklist. So I know that there's going to be some tasks going along with this template as well. So if I don't want to plug any comments, if there's no other changes I need to make, I can simply click on Save. And the system's going to go ahead and pull that template into my transaction. Again, pulling the forms that I would typically use for a purchase residential transaction. The repetitious data will also be filled out on this template as well. So again, it's saving me time, so I don't have to worry about pulling forms in or going ahead and filling out all the data that I have to type out every single time. I can also see here that we have a signed approval letter, and the office disclosure or the outside document came in as well. So now that the system went ahead and pulled in the transaction documents for me, let's go ahead and start bringing some buyers into this transaction. And there's multiple ways to do that, right? So you can go into a cover sheet here, and you can go to the top and fill all the buyer information if you want to. So that's definitely an option for you. So if I wanted to plug in buyer name and the street address for my buyer, I can. Or I can go to the residential contract, and I can go in here and start filling the information for my buyers here as well. But what I'm going to show you, so if I go back, we see here that we have tabs on the top of the screen. And I like to work from left to right, and it keeps me organized. But if I go ahead and click on the Parties tab now, I can see that here's my contact information already in there. And then what I can do is click on New, and we're going to go ahead and select Buyer 1. So now what I can do is fill in all the information for Buyer 1. And it's going to typically ask for more information that you on this particular screen that you might get on just going to the contract and filling it out there. So we can see that we have the first name, the last name, the email address for all the data that we can fill out. And the reason why I like coming here is because zipForm has a built-in contact book, which gives you the ability to import contacts into, so you can go ahead and pull contacts from, Outlook or Gmail, and you can import them into zipForm as a CSV or VCard format. Or I can go ahead and just fill the data out, and if I feel like if I'm ever going to do business with this buyer in the future, I can save them as a contact and add them into my zipForm contact book. So that way, if my buyer wants to put an offer on another property, I don't have to fill out their information every time. I can pull them from my address book and pull them into my transaction. So this is one thing that I have already done. So all I want to do is go out up here and click on Add Contact. And I can go to my built-in address book, and I can find my buyer. So we're going to select Mr. Dave here, and we're going to click on Save. So it's going to pull Dave's information. I can double check it to make sure it's all correct. And then we can go ahead and click on Save. So now we've gone ahead and pulled Buyer 1 in, and then we can go ahead and click on New again, and we're going to select Buyer 2. We're going to click on Add Contact, and we're going to go ahead and click on the address book, and we're going to bring in Karen as well. So now we have Dave and Karen involved in our transaction. So the next step, what we can do is click on the Property tab. And we're not going to go ahead and we can fill information in if we want to, but what we're going to do here is click on the MLS Connect. And we're going to go ahead and plug in a multiple listing ID. And we're going to click Include the Property Photo, and we're going to reach out to the MLS and find that property. So here we found the property. All we need to do now is import that data in. It's going to bring that data right into our transaction. So then what we can do is start filling in some dates. Maybe the listing date was back on the 1st, and we're going to say that we'll be moving along here pretty quick. We have a date of contract that we're writing today, and we're going to set up a closing date here for February 25th. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and click on Save. If I go back to my documents, we're going to notice now that if I click on the cover sheet, that we have my buyer's information in there, my company, the listing brokerage information, and now information about the transaction as well. So all that data got pulled in from the MLS, and we've also, from the property tab and the parties tab, data is also flowed in my transaction. So again, without 0 keystrokes, we have a lot of information involved in this transaction. You'll now notice that we have due dates being set up for our tasks. Okay, so based upon the dates, the listing date, the closing date, due dates are going to start being applied to your transaction. So if I go to my checklist at this point, you're going to notice now that we have due dates. They're going to be set up. So we have a due date for our approval letter. We have a follow-up with the customer. So that was 60 days after the closing. And now we have due dates that are being set for our signed documents as well. Okay. I can look at this and see what urgent tasks I have. So these are telling me that, hey, Mike, you have a signed approval letter due that's due yesterday. So we probably need to get that done. So any urgent tasks you're going to see at the top here to draw to your attention. You can email this out either in the list view or look at it from a calendar view. So if you're looking at this from a calendar, you can kind of see what you're going to be working on for the month of January, how things are going to be working on with the month of February as well. Okay. If you want to email this out, you can click on send. So we'll give that a second to load. And you'll notice here we have the transaction calendar. It has contact information for the agent and then information about the transaction as well. So you can send this to whoever you want and get a general sense of all your tasks and how the month of January is going to be moving along, or it could have been the month of February. If you want to put in hard dates, so as the agent, if you want to come in here and say, we're going to meet the inspector on the 24th, I click on a day and plug in meet inspector. And then I can go ahead and save that, and I will be notified to meet the inspector a couple days before this due date for this transaction. So for 1327 Claiborne Lane, I will be reminded to meet that inspector. So you can go ahead and plug in all your hard dates if you want to. You can add additional tasks if you need to. So you can give a task name, decide if it's going to be applied to an already created checklist, if it's going to be fall into another category, and what the due date is going to be. Is it going to be a fixed date? Is it going to be a relative date, 2 days, 5 days before anything? And you'll be able to go ahead and have all that information onto your checklist, and you'll be reminded to do that task when the due date starts to come up. Okay. So list view, calendar view, you are going to be able to switch between 2 different options. So let's go back to our documents here and take a second here to talk about how to bring in some additional documents. Okay, and there's multiple ways to do that. So if you want to say you want to bring in a document from the outside, you can simply click on Add Document, and you can browse for a file. So if I'm looking for a document here and I want to go to my zipForm demo folder here, I can go ahead and bring in a home inspection report. I can go ahead and drop it into my transaction. I can also go ahead and click on Add Folder if I want to take it one step further. We can name this Pics of Property. And we can go ahead and click on OK. It's going to generate a folder which will be empty. But we can fix that, so we can go ahead and click on Add Document. We can browse for a file and say we want to bring in some pictures. So we'll bring in the back, the garage, and the front of the house. And we can bring those pictures into our transaction as well. So what we have here is for you to have a secure location for all your documents to be had into one single transaction. Okay. We can also talk about the capabilities. So we simply uploading off your computer is one way. Up here in the right hand of your corner, in the left-hand corner of your transaction, there's a menu drop-down, and then 2 other options how to bring transaction documents in. So I can email to the transaction. So if I send this to anyone and they simply respond to the email, they will go ahead and those documents will be attached and plugged right into our transaction. So you can go ahead and email it to yourself and add documents to it, or send it off to an inspector, and they can attach everything and then send it right back into your transaction. So this is another way and how you can bring documents into your transaction. You can also go ahead up here and click on the ability to use a fax cover sheet. So the cover sheet is an item that you can print off or send to anyone, and they can take that cover sheet, put it on top of the documents that they're going to send in, and then go ahead and push those right in the zip form as well. So it gives you a number where to send it to, who is it attention to, the transaction name, and then directions. So you can also go ahead and send it as an email attachment if you prefer to do it that way. So, and then we give you the email address and where to send it to. Okay. So the cover sheet can also be used as a divider. So if you want to split documents before coming in, you just plug this cover sheet in as a splitter and then send it all off, and those documents would be split as it comes into the transaction that way. Moving along on our transaction toolbar here, we have the capability, obviously, to print documents, so you can print documents out very easily. But one item here I'll make sense of here is you actually have the ability to print different pages. So if you can go ahead and select what documents you like to print, you can actually go ahead and select different pages, and they'll populate on the right-hand side. So we can drag and drop those in any particular order that we like, and then go ahead and print those off. We also have the ability to send these documents out via either email or fax, so you have the option. So choosing your documents, and even again choosing your pages if need be. Anytime you see a blue business card, it means you can access your transaction parties or go ahead and access the address book. So two different options. So if we want to send to our buyers, we just simply click Dave and Karen, and they will be, your email address will be plugged in. These are the documents that we're sending out. And then down here below, you get options. So we can send it as a single PDF or separate PDF files. And then we can also include a fax cover sheet. So if we're sending those documents out either via email or fax, they will receive a cover sheet, and they can use that cover sheet to send those documents right back in. Down here below is your message. So it does come personally from you, and you can also set up your taglines within your profile. We'll touch base on that at the very end. While we're talking on the topic of getting documents out to your clients, either via email or fax, or eventually we're going to show you how to get this digitally signed as well. One of the features that's in zipForm that probably a lot of people don't even know is available is this feature up here called Zip Consult. And Zip Consult is exactly what we're doing today, and it's an online meeting service. This allows you to plug in a first name and a last name and an email address, and then add it into a meeting room. And it's an instant meeting service. So you can actually go ahead and even access your address book if you prefer. So maybe, again, Dave and Karen, and you can go ahead and meet now with them. So what this is going to allow you to do is have an online meeting with your client. Okay, so they can come in and they can see your screen. So what we can do now as the agent is go into zipForm, open up the residential contract, and fill this document out together. So I can ask, they can ask me questions. I can show them what this means, what that means. And it's a very interactive experience without them having to drive across town to meet me. I don't have to drive to them. They don't have to drive to me. So again, it's a very great option to meet with your clients. But you're not just limited to what's in zipForm. You can show them items off your web page, maybe off the MLS as well. Okay, so you have complete control over what you want to share, but the client can see exactly what's on your screen and have this very interactive experience. Okay. While we're talking on the top, while we're on the screen showing some form filling functionalities, obviously you have the capability to open up and go into full screen, which would be a little easier on the eyes. If you click on the icon again, it will go back and switch it to your original size. These tabs do open and close, so you can go ahead and open those and close them as you wish. One of the items here that we're going to talk about is in regards to an amendment. So say there's some additional modifications, and right here, anytime you see a gray pencil on this amendment, you can click on that and then access your clause book. So this is how you'd insert a clause, and we can insert that clause right into our transaction. And say that clause had to do with like an inspection that had to do with FHA, and maybe FHA required that we needed to fix a particular peeling paint on one of the window seals. You can attach a photo to this addendum, okay, and then we can go ahead and order this amendment. We can attach a photo, and we can browse for that photo and say it has to do with the back of the house, and we click on Open. Once we attach this photo to this amendment, we can drag it wherever it needs to be. Maybe it's down here. And then now anytime this document gets sent out, so if I email this form or send it out for e-signature, you'll notice that the amendment will be attached and that photo is going to come along with it. No matter where this amendment goes, a photo is going to go with it no matter what. So this photo and amendment are now 2 in 1, and it's a great easy way to attach photos to documents, so that way you don't have to remind yourself to go ahead and send it off at a later time, or send it out of zipForm and then go find the photo and then go ahead and send it off separately. This way they go out together at the same time. All right, so now what we're going to talk about is fulfilling one of these placeholders that has a due date of 1/19. So this is something that I know I need to complete. And again, we can go back to the multiple ways on how to bring documents in. But most likely, this is a document that is in someone else's possession, and it's probably I want to invite them into my transaction. So what we're going to do is click on Collaborate. And from here, we're going to add a person into this transaction to collaborate with. So I can add a person. We're going to go to our address book, and I'm going to go ahead and find one of my lenders that I know is working this transaction. So we're going to click on Mark here, and we're going to click on Save. And now I have some options. What can Mark do? Can Mark see any one of these documents? So I can share documents with Mark very easily. Or I can not share any documents with Mark. It's really up to my control. Based upon my selection of documents that I'm going to share, can Mark edit the forms? Can he view the history? Can Mark add files? So we're definitely going to give Mark the option to add files into this transaction. And then you can decide on how long can Mark be involved in this transaction. Okay, so we're going to say that we're going to cut this back a little bit, and we're going to give Mark until Saturday to be in this transaction for right now. And then what we'll do is we're going to click on Send. So we're going to invite Mark into this transaction, and then we're going to say, hi Mark, please upload the pre-approval. So then we're going to send this off to Mark. So an invitation, an email is going to be sent to Mark, so we're going to wait for that email to come across here. So we'll give it a second. So here's the email that Mark will receive. It'll say, Dear Mark, and it says, hi Mark, please upload the pre-approval. And you'll notice that it's coming from the email address of you. So it's not coming from a do not reply. This is coming from a personal email address. So when Mark gets the email to be invited into this transaction, it's coming from someone he knows, not from an email address he has no idea who it's coming from. So then you can see that he has the option to click on Start Collaborating. So he's going to click on that link there, and it's going to take him to a screen where he has a couple different options. So if he's a new user and Mark's never created a collaboration account, he can go ahead and create a new user and create a free account. So these free accounts are going to be created most likely by lenders, title companies, appraisers. If you're a current zipForm user, then you can simply log in with your current credentials and join this transaction. So you might be invited into transactions by other agents, and you can simply join their transaction by just logging in with your own credentials. So since Mark is a person that I've done business with in the past and he already has a collaboration account, we're just going to log into Mark's account. So mlender123, and we're going to plug in his password here. And we're simply going to log in. So it's going to take us right into the transaction that he was invited into. So you'll notice right away that we have contact information for the agent, information about the transaction, and how long he's going to be invited or shared in this transaction with. Okay. he has any questions, he can contact the agent directly, so it'll put a message back in zipForm if he had any questions. He can also even go ahead and now just click on Add Document to bring in a document. So he's going to search for a file, and we're going to go back to our zipForm demo folder here, and we're going to bring in the approval letter. So he finds a document on his computer, he clicks on OK, and he uploads that right into the transaction. Okay, so now what he can do is simply close out, because his instructions were very clear. And he's going to say, I'm done collaborating. And we're going to say, hi, Mike. The letter is there. Thank you. So he plugs in a little message back to Mike, and he's going to click on Send. And it's going to send me an email back to me notifying that Mark has completed editing the transaction. So here's the email that you will receive. So it tells me that, hey Mike, Mark has completed editing the transaction, and he put, hi Mike, the letter is there, thank you. Okay, so the system is notifying me that Mark is all done with his part that he needed to do. So what we can do now is back in zipForm. If we go in here and refresh this transaction, and we go back into the Claiborne lane, you're going to see that we now have that approval letter in my transaction. I can go ahead and see that document, make sure it's the correct document. It looks like it is. That's awesome. So what we can do here is drag and drop that approval letter into my placeholder and fulfill it, and then complete my task. So that way I know it's in the placeholder, and now I've completed that task. So back on my checklist now, I can see that I've completed the signed approval letter, and the approval letter is now attached to my task, and I can open it from here as well. So it's a very simple way to attach documents to a checklist and then complete the task as it's done and completed. So now that we have the approval letter in our transaction, let's go ahead and send this transaction out to go ahead and send this transaction out for e-signature. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click on e-sign. We are going to be using the digital ink solution. So we click on e-sign. We can name our submission if we like to. And we're going to go ahead and select some documents. So we're going to sign the amendment, and we're going to send out a home inspection report as well. Okay. So then what we'll do is we'll click on Next, and we're going to select from our transaction parties. So we'll go ahead and select Dave, and then we'll select Karen for our two buyers that are going to be signing today. So then we have buyer 1 and 2. And what you're going to notice here is that the order is being set for 1 and then 2. So what that tells you is that when it goes out for signing, Dave will be the first one to sign, and then it will go to Dave for him, to Karen to sign. So Dave would sign first, and then it would go to Karen. But Dave and Karen are husband and wife. So I don't think it matters on who goes ahead and signs first. So I think we just want to have the ability to let them sign at the same time. So what you have the option to do is click, drag, and drop, and combine them together. So now we have order 1 and 1. So that tells you now that Dave and Karen are going to get the option to sign at the same time. Okay, so Dave doesn't have to wait for Karen. Karen doesn't have to wait for Dave. Okay. Then we have the CC list. So we can carbon copy anyone on the signing. Maybe it's the title company, the lender, the co-op agent. So if you're driving along and you get this transaction signed, it gets completed, you can know that it will go off to whatever parties that you carbon copied. So that way you don't have to worry about getting to a computer to get that transaction sent to them. It'll do it for you and automatically. So the CC list can come in very handy if you're out and about and you're busy. The system will send off the signed documents to whatever parties that you wanted, that you told the system to do so. You can also choose on your personal preferences the time zone that you're going to be signing in. So if you want to switch it, you can. So if it's Central Time, you can switch it to there as well. Okay, so you can choose, but that's set within your personal preferences. And then you have the CC carbon copy here as well, so you can carbon copy your signers. And then there's two additional features here, text message authentication and the verify ID. You'll notice here that there is a notice that tells that this is an additional fee if you do choose to use one of these. But this is going to be something that's more unique. So if you say that I want to send a text message to Dave and he has to use that code to get into the signing, he can do so. Or if you want to say, well, I'm going to send you a verification ID. Well, that's going to be a series of questions that he'll have to answer to kind of verify and say who you say you are. So either one of those are options, but again, will be communicated between you and the client. Only really if the client is not 100%, maybe they're uncomfortable or new to e-sign options, so you can offer those two different solutions and say, hey, if I send you a text message, will that be something that you'd be more comfortable with in getting in to sign? Okay, but those two are not required. You can leave them unchecked, and it won't ask you for anything additional to use it. Okay, so we're going to leave those unchecked, and then for today, we're going to remove Karen out of the signing. So we're going to go ahead and click on the trash can here, and we're going to remove this signer. So then what we're going to do is click on Next. It's going to pull us right into digital ink. So we'll go ahead and wait for that to load. So here, everything on the transaction you're going to notice will be pre-tagged for the signer already, so we don't have to worry about setting up the pre-signatures. Those will already be on it. So we can see that we already have Dave here. If I want to add a signature or initial here, I can drag and drop it onto the transaction. So there we are, dragging initial onto the transaction that way. We can add text boxes, check boxes if we need to. We can also go ahead and choose our additional document that we brought in from the outside. So we're going to click on the home inspection report because this is a document which was a PDF document. So we need to tag this document. So we're going to scroll down here and we're going to see, okay, we can drag and drop a signature line right onto that. So we're going to do that as well. It automatically generates a date field for me. And if I need to drag any other initials on here, I can. So you can just drag an initial box there if need be. Okay. After you've set up all the signatures or verified all the signatures are correct and the initials are correct, you are now ready to send this transaction out for signatures. So we're going to click on Send. And we have an email message automatically being generated, and then we're going to click on Send Now. So what you're going to see here is a submission review. So it's telling you who you sent it to, if they still need to register, and if there's still actions required, and then what documents you sent out to them to be signed. So we can we'll close out of this, and we'll go back to our transaction. Now we're going to go through and get this transaction signed. So here's the email that will be received by Dave to get into his signing. So this is what's being sent to the client. So Dave, all he has to do is click here to sign. It's going to take him into digital ink. And the first item that the signer has to do is accept to the e-sign consent. So they will go ahead and click on accept, and they will simply click on next. Upon clicking on next, they're going to be brought to a screen as soon as it loads here. And it's going to allow us to create a signing PIN and a password and choose our signature style. So here we are at our option. So we can go ahead and select our signing PIN, and this is for security purposes. Okay, the signing password we're going to plug in here so it remembers my signature style, and it's verifying again who I am, who I say I am when I get into signing other transactions in the future. I can also go ahead and choose a signature font, so I can choose any one of these styles down here below, or I have the option to draw my own signature if I want to. So I can drag, draw my own signature if need be. The nice thing about digital ink is that your signing experience is going to be the same on any device. So a phone, a tablet, a computer, your experience is going to be the same. Okay, so that's why you have the option to choose a predetermined style if you're on a computer. But if you're on a phone or a tablet, it might be best to draw your own signature. but your experience is going to be the same. So that's one of the great benefits with Digital Ink, is that the experience, if a client calls you and they're saying, hey, I'm having an issue signing on my phone, what am I going to see? Well, you can assist them because you know exactly what they're going to see. So we're going to keep a predetermined signature style, and now we're going to on to view sign. Oops. I'll go ahead and plug in my PIN again. And now it's going to take us to an option for us to either let me review, or we can simply click on go. And the difference between those two options is, if you let me review, what you're going to do is scroll at your own pace. The client's going to scroll at their own pace, and they can read the contract, look at all different items. If they click on go, the system's going to walk them through the signing. Okay, so I click here to initial. I click here to sign. And you'll notice here we have a progress bar that's being completed. So I click here to initial. I click here to sign. After the client has finished signing, it just simply pops up saying finish signing. I can either stay here to review some more if I wanted to, or make changes, or I can just simply click on finish. Once I finish, we'll process the documents for you, and then we can simply go ahead and review our documents. And now I can scroll down, I can see where I signed, my initials, where they're at, and review my completed. Now I can actually save these or print these down to my own computer if I like to. So that's an also awesome feature for the client. They can choose to print and download right within the application. So back in zipForm, what will happen is you're going to, if you go back into that transaction, you're going to get a Digital Ink completed folder automatically. You will also receive an email as well with the completed documents. So we email you the signed documents. We also push the signed documents back in zipForm automatically for you. So here's that Digital Ink completed document, so you can see them. You can open them up, make sure that everything is correct, looks great. If I want to email these out, I can, or I can send them through collaboration through here, and then share them with whoever I want. So if it's Mark, and Mark wants to see the signed document now, I can update that and send an invitation and save it and send it off to Mark, and Mark can just log into his account and see that document. We also include a Digital Ink audit trail. So this is your detailed report of the submission. Okay, so this tells you who signed, where they signed, IP addresses, the whole 9 yards. It's a very secure signing option, as the signatures are actually embedded into the transaction itself. Okay, so those cannot be broken apart, and we send the audit trail and the PDF to go along with it. So now that we have a signed amendment, one of the items that we have in our checklist here, so let's go back to our checklist, is getting a signed addendum in there. So if it's required and I want to attach a signed document to this task, I can do so very easily. So I can go up here, click on the plus sign, I can select an existing document, and I can see here I have my Digital Ink signatures completed, and I can go ahead and check off that amendment, and we'll click on OK. And now it'll attach that amendment to it, and now I complete that task. Okay, I can open up that amendment from here. I can look at that document. Everything looks good. So that's a signed, completed document attached to my checklist. So that's really what you're trying to accomplish, is get your signed documents onto the checklist. So it's very easy to tie those two together. So the next phase we're going to be talking about is looking at transactions in a whole. So everything we've done today, looking at our checklist, is everything geared to this transaction. Look at the calendar for this transaction. If we look at our history, you're going to see that we have a complete history of how this transaction has moved along. I can see when I sent items out, if I've collaborated, if Mark uploaded a document. So the history is a detailed report of what is going along within the transaction when I complete tasks and when documents come back in. I also have the option to plug in my own notes as well. So if I want to plug in a new note, I can do so, After I plug in the note, something I want to remind myself or just put a note in there for my own personal preference, I can save that note in my transaction as well. But again, everything we've done so far has been related to just the 1327 Claiborne Lane. Okay. I know there's probably some questions regarding, if this links to any other external calendars. And the answer to that question is not today, but we are working on that for a release within first quarter. So we are going to sync up with, your Gmail and your Microsoft and Yahoo. So we are working on getting integration between external calendars. So whatever you have here will sync up with an external calendar. So that is something we're definitely working on. So now, as I said, we're going to take a second here to start looking at transactions in a whole. So we have your tabs up top here, and then we have tasks. Okay, so this is going to allow us to look at multiple transactions, all my tasks that I have going on for transactions across the board. Okay, and right now it's standard to start looking at just the week. So I can look at all the tasks I have going on for January 17th through the 23rd. If I look at it from a month, I can look at all the tasks going on for the entire month of January, or I have items that are going on for the entire month of February. I can see that I have a closing date on the 25th. If I hover over it, it'll tell me what transaction that closing date is regarding. If you organize and color code your signed documents, you can see that I have 3 signed documents that need to be turned in, and if I completed them before the 23rd. Okay, so they need to be in on the 23rd. Okay, I also have something remind me here that I have to follow up the customer on the 29th, so that's 60 days after the closing date. So again, you have your urgent tasks for multiple transactions across the board. So this is going to tell me what I have to work on today or items that are past due that I probably want to get completed. And again, you're going to receive an email notification notifying you of what documents you need to transaction tasks you need to complete across the board. So I can see when they were due, what I need to do to accomplish them. Okay, so it tells me what the transaction name is. If I want to go directly into that transaction, I can click in it and go directly into that transaction very easily. Okay, so you can work a lot, you can accomplish a lot from just working on your task tab and looking at transactions that way as well. Okay, so again, looking at either from a calendar view or the list view, so you can see them when they're due, when you need to complete it. You can start to see when tasks start being completed. So here's I can see if this has been done. I can also see if there's a document attached here as well. So I can click in it, and I can see that there's an amendment here, so I can open that amendment from this section as well. So not just within the transaction, but also from the task tab. So we're giving you a lot of flexibility here to be productive and work a lot from your tasks. You can see what you need to complete, and what you need to have turned in, or items that need to be completed. And again, for you as an agent, you can put as much task and work on yourself as you want, because you'll have full control over creating your own checklist. Okay. And then here is your contacts. So if you want to come here and start uploading contacts, you can import them in. And again, going back to our item I just talked about just a minute ago about syncing up, we are going to allow that to help assist with syncing contacts as well. So hopefully that will be something we again have released here in the first quarter. For the agents that are here, I do want to show you where you can access extra additional support. So if you go to www.zipform.com, if you hover over support and then our FAQ, you're going to see that we have different products here. So if you're interested in taking a look at additional support for transaction management, you can click here and look at all of our topics. Okay. If you open one of these up and how to create a new checklist in a transaction, well, you can click on that and it'll give you step-by-step on how to complete that. If you go back and you want to look at some how-to videos, we actually have our own YouTube webpage. So if you click on the how-to video, you'll see that we have, again, another introduction to zipTMS. And then we also have an introduction. If you click on here, it'll take you to our YouTube channel. And there's tons of videos on here, ZipForm Plus training videos, Digital Ink training videos, and then, an introduction to the zipTMS application as well. So this is where you can also go to get additional training if need be. Okay, so either through our support and FAQ, and then there's also some option to go to our YouTube channel as well. So in this next point of time, I'm going to start talking about, so for any of you that want to stay, I'm going to show for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to start covering some of the broker functionalities that you could have available within a brokerage account. So I did see there's some questions on there, so I want to take a second to talk about some of the broker functionalities. So with a broker account, again, this is a company oversight that allows you to have all your agents under one house account. Okay, so you can actually see all of your agents' transactions and look at their tasks. So if I come in, I'm a brokerage administrator and I've created a broker account. If I click on my drop down here, I can say that I can select an office or a user, and I can choose any one of my agents. Okay, so I can choose to see any one of the agents, and I can see exactly if I want to open up Reggie White here, and I can look at their transactions if I want to. I can go into their transaction and look at their documents. I can go to their checklist and see exactly what they're working on here as well. Okay, so that was one of the functionalities as a brokerage administrator, to have this capability to look at either a particular agent, or if I want to look at an entire office or a user, I can select the corporate location and look at all the transactions within my entire company. So now I can go ahead, if I want to search for an agent this way, I can type in Reggie White, and I can look up his transactions that way. So very easy way to look for his agent's transaction, look at all of your company's transactions. And as a brokerage administrator, you do not need to have the agent's login, because you're going to see them on your agent list under your administration tab. So you can see all your agents within your company. So the broker admin, again, is you have a house account with all your agents underneath it. So once the agent starts using the account tied to the broker, you will be able to see all the agents here. Okay, so you can have brokerage administrators, which would be yourself, or the broker admin. They can oversee and do everything. You have location administrators that can manage a particular office location. So again, you don't need to have an agent's login to do that. You just need to have them in your brokerage account. One of the changes on the broker side with templates is that you have scope. Okay, so going back into this residential purchase transaction, you'll notice here that we have the ability to change the status. And again, agent template would be available only to the user that creates it. And then you have the option to create a global template, which would be available to every agent within the entire company. So that way, I'm saying that anytime an agent within my company creates a purchase residential transaction, I'm going to apply that template. So that's one of the changes. Also, on the office level, you have the capability to look at creating templates just for a particular office, and only those agents can utilize that office template. So the brokerage administrator, if you have a brokerage account, you can create scope, global, and office templates. So then within your template, what you have in there is going to be applied to an agent's transaction versus being applied just to yourself. So you're saying, these are the forms that we want you to use. This is the placeholder, and the way you apply a placeholder, again, is to go up here, add a document, and create a document placeholder. And you give it a name for a document you want to have in the future. Okay, so again, very easy way to create placeholders. Your checklist is going to be more created on a level of what you want your agents to do. Do you want them to be reminded to put a sign on the property? Do you want them to be reminded to change the lockbox? Okay, again, full control over what you want them to do. It's just you're going to have control over that. And then you can set your due dates for when you want your signed documents turned in. Okay, so you can see I want the signed sales agreement to 2 days before the closing date. So again, the agent's going to be reminded to go and turn that document in. From the brokerage aspect, after an agent's working on a transaction, so if you give that example of our transaction we've been working on during this webinar, we have the 1327. We can see that as the agent starts completing their tasks on their checklist and they're turning in signed addendums, and they start attaching those documents to the checklist. As a broker admin, if I'm working off my task tab, I have the option to switch to my task, select an officer or a user, and go ahead and select my corporate location. And I can check off one of my agents. So if I want to look at tasks just for Reggie White, I can. But if I go to my corporate location, I'm going to see all tasks available to everyone in the entire company. And I can start to see when they start completing their tasks, if there's tasks that are overdue. And if I hover over, I can see, we have a task that's past due, and it's, Mike hasn't, he hasn't completed it. I can either, question him, shoot an email saying, hey, Mike, what's going on with 123 Virginia Avenue that was supposed to be turned in a few days ago, okay? I can also see, again, when they're turning in documents. So here I see that an agent has completed a task, and I can actually open up that document from my account and look at that document, make sure it's correct, and if it is, great. I can let the agent know that I think it's also correct and change the status and say, you know what, this document's approved, and let them say, hey, I have looked, and it's the doc, and it is all set. So then you can apply that, and then the notification will go back to the agent, letting them know that, hey, not only did the agent just complete the task, but I've also go ahead and I saw the document, and now I've approved it as well. Okay. If me as the admin, if I want to go into that agent's transaction from here, I can click here and go into it and start looking at their checklist to make sure they're completing all their tasks as well. I mean, the main goal here at the very end is this whole checklist should have green check boxes to the right of it, right? So, and especially your final signed documents, you want to make sure those are all turned in and that you can see them. If everything was completed and you saw that all the signed documents were there, what you can do as an admin is actually go ahead and approve the entire transaction and saying, I saw the signed docs, all good, closing. So I apply that. So now I'm approved the entire transaction, and now I can go ahead and close that transaction. So that way this transaction is closed. So on the transaction list, if I want to look for just my closed transactions, I can do so, and I can see that 1327 Claiborne Lane has been closed, and there's a green check letting me know that, okay, well, it's been closed, or if any other admins want to go in, they can go into that closed transaction and look at the history and say, okay, Mike has looked at documents, and he's approved the transaction, and it's all good, and he's closing it. So a broker admin, if you set up a brokerage account, you have a ton of control over the company, and really is getting to that one-stop shop to do all of your business within zipForm and with the new transaction management. So that really covers everything that we're going to accomplish today. I do hope that everyone had a wonderful and great understanding of what this application is. We have recorded this webinar, and I will be forwarding it off so that the company, everyone will have access to this recorded webinar in the future, and then most likely we will be scheduling another one in the near future. So I appreciate everyone's time today. I know that it takes time and effort to get into these, so again, I thank everyone. Everyone's been really great, awesome questions. We will go ahead and do our best to continue answering your questions as we close up here. But again, I thank you very much for your time today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.